Hello and welcome to the Fockham Hall report on the UK 2015 election, or probably it would be better to call it the psychopath extravaganza. I look upon most MPs rather like billboards, where they're like a huge advertising display and nothing much behind it. They're sort of soulless vessels, and also I found the ones I've come across to be very gullible. You know, if somebody in industry says, well, I think we should give the entire population rat poison, and someone in a white coat says that to them, they'll probably say, oh yes, and how much am I going to get to promote this? In the early 90s, I was working in London on a very high pressure project and was working all the hours I could on this, and it was very, very stressful, and I'd often get home very late at night, and because I was freelance I only got paid for the hours that I worked, and on Friday most people went home early, and that particular Friday, this was in the early 90s, I left especially early, just after lunch, and got to Liverpool Street Station at about sort of 3 to half past, so I avoided rush hour, and luckily the train came in. It was a beautiful day, and I was just winding down and just relaxing, and in those days I used to read a newspaper, and I got on the train, and the carriage I got on, half of it was first class and the other half wasn't, and I used to make a beeline for that carriage because most people thought the entire carriage was first class and it was normally a little bit emptier than the rest. Anyway, I got on the carriage and sat down and just opened the newspaper and, looking forward to the weekend. And I won't mention who this MP was, and he got on this particular carriage, and he noticed somebody at the back of the aisle and said, oh, hello! Now, where normally a person would walk up the aisle and speak to the person, no. He actually stood at the beginning of the aisle with his hands either side of the rails, leaning forward, crunching the side of my newspaper up, and was advertising to the entire carriage how marvellous he was. He said, oh, he sort of just had a late night sitting, and I'm going home, and the wife's going to Champneys this weekend, and I don't know if Nanny's there or not, I might have to look after the little ones. And he was bullshitting how marvellous he was. Going on and on and on. And I'm a placid sort of person. It takes a lot to wind me up. I'm a bit like my old dad, you know, he was very placid as well. But I don't know whether it was the project I was working on, but I was really getting wound up with this ministerial arm over the side of my newspaper. And eventually a chap got on and said, excuse me, he wanted to come through. And the MP looked round and said, do you wish to come through? And the bloke sarcastically said, no mate, I'm seeing for the benefit of my health. It's bleeding obvious, isn't it? So where a normal person would step back into the area where the entrance lobby is, no. He went across where I was, so I got a whiff of his ministerial armpit, and my newspaper and me was sort of scrunched up. I sort of tutted loudly and showed I was pretty upset by it, and I was getting a whiff of his ministerial armpit. Now, I noticed the establishment has a sort of smell about it. I first became aware of this when I was at school and had to go into the headmaster's office. It smells of sort of gin and stale farts. And I got this sort of gin and stale farts pop. And he then sort of didn't apologise or anything. He then went back and, bullshitting again. And opposite me, the other side of me, the other side of the aisle, was a woman who was also getting a bit fed up with this MP, and we was looking at each other, and our minds were sort of in sync, you know. Who's going to say something first? And I felt like clapping and saying, "You're bloody marvellous. We're all impressed. Now sod off and leave us in peace." But we were both sort of, and it would take a lot for me to do that. I'm not that type of person. And eventually this sort of little bell rang, which means the doors were going to close and the train was going to set off. And that was his excuse to sort of leave us. And he said, okay, he said, I'll leave you peasants to it, because I can travel first class. And he turned around and walked into the first class area. And that really irritated me. I felt like going in there and saying, "Excuse me, mate, we pay your wages." And at that point, the girl looked round at me and I looked round at her and she said, "God help us. If that's the sort of scum we've got in office, what future has humanity got?" And I had to agree with her. Well, later on in that MP's career, it turned out he was a man at C&A, and I'm not talking about the clothing people. Shall we say he was AC, DC, and a complete C. Now, a friend of mine has actually noticed that nearly all the politicians at this election time are coming out with the same bullshit. They say, we must go forward. But the main word is change. We must have change. Then it's difficult, hard, and they must ensure things are going on. And if anything has gone wrong, there are lessons to be learned from this. Then they must have balance and must be clear. Surprising how many people still believe this bullshit. And I'm a bit concerned that bullshit may be contagious. And on that note, thanks for watching.